I lost everything I had built over 38 years, and the night I drove to my daughter's house with one duffel bag in the back seat, I told myself that family was different. Family didn't keep score. Family showed up. I was wrong about that. My name is Howard. Wait, no. My name is Bernard. People have called me Bernie my whole life, but the night I stood on my daughter's porch in the rain, I felt like neither of those men. I felt like no one. Let me back up. For 38 years, I ran Caldwell Precision, a mid-sized manufacturing company out of Akron, Ohio. We made specialized components for the automotive industry. Nothing glamorous, nothing that would get you on the cover of Forbes, but solid, honest work that employed 62 people at our peak. I started the company at 26 with a $40,000 loan from a credit union and a used CNC machine in a rented garage. I worked 16-hour days for the first decade. I missed Little League games. I missed school plays. I told myself every time that I was building something real, something that would matter, something I could one day hand to the people I loved. 3 months before my 61st birthday, the company collapsed in 11 days. Not slowly, not the way a business is supposed to die, with warning signs you can see coming if you're paying attention. 11 days. Our largest client, Meridian Auto Group, terminated their contract without cause. The same week, our primary lender called in a $2.1 million line of credit, citing technical default clauses buried in language I had signed 12 years earlier and never thought about again. Our insurance carrier, the same company we had paid premiums to for 2 decades, suddenly discovered that our liability coverage had lapses going back 3 years that somehow no one had caught until now. By day 11, I had nothing to show for 38 years except a 2009 Ford F-150 with a cracked dashboard and a duffel bag of clothes. I lost the house in the first wave. The Akron house, the one I had paid off, had been refinanced twice in the last 5 years to keep the business alive. I had never told anyone that. Not my daughter, not my son-in-law. I was too proud, and I kept believing I could turn things around before anyone needed to know. My wife, Sandra, had passed 4 years earlier. Ovarian cancer, stage 4, 7 months from diagnosis to gone. After that, my daughter Melissa was the only family I had left. Melissa and her husband Trevor Albright. They lived in a 4-bedroom house in Dublin, Ohio, the kind of suburb where the lawns are always perfectly edged and every garage has 2 German cars in it. I had helped them with the down payment. $60,000 in 2019, money I gave freely, money I told them was a gift and never once asked about again. I drove the 4 hours from Akron to Dublin on a Tuesday in November. It was raining the whole way. I kept the radio off because I couldn't stand the noise. When I pulled into their neighborhood, I sat in the truck for a few minutes at the corner of their street, looking at the lights on in their house, trying to talk myself into going to the door. I had called ahead. That felt important to me. I didn't just show up. I called Melissa that morning and told her what had happened, at least the broad outline of it. She had gone quiet on the phone for a long moment, and then she said, "Okay, Dad, come over. We'll figure something out." I held on to those words for 4 hours of rain and interstate. Trevor answered the door. He was in his usual after-work clothes, athletic pants, a fleece pullover, and he looked at me in my duffel bag with an expression I had never seen on his face before. It wasn't surprise. It looked more like someone who had been expecting a package they didn't actually want. "Bernie," he said, not Dad. He had called me Dad for 7 years. Melissa appeared behind him and I felt the knot in my chest loosen slightly. She was my daughter. Whatever was happening with Trevor's expression, she was my daughter, and she would fix this. "Dad," she said, and then she looked at Trevor. That look between them told me everything, but I wasn't ready to understand it yet. Trevor stepped slightly to one side but didn't fully open the door. "Come in for a minute," he said. They sat me down at their kitchen island. Melissa made coffee. I didn't drink. Trevor stood with his arms crossed, leaning against the counter, and after a silence that lasted too long, he said, "Bernie, Melissa and I talked about this today. We really did, but we have the kids to think about. We can't have instability in the house right now." I looked at my daughter. She was staring at her coffee mug. "Melissa," I said. "Dad, it's not forever," she said. "Just until you get back on your feet. We have the Hendersons staying with us already, Trevor's parents, for the holidays, and with the kids' schedules, I'm not asking to move in permanently," I said. A few weeks, maybe a month, just until I understand what I'm dealing with. Trevor shook his head. We can't do that. I'm sorry. He didn't sound sorry. He sounded like a man who had made a decision and was waiting to be done with the conversation. Melissa finally looked up at me. There are resources, Dad. There are programs for people going through what you're going through. Bankruptcy counselors. Transitional housing. I stood up before she finished the sentence. I didn't say anything. I picked up my duffel bag from the floor and I walked to the door and I let myself out. I sat in my truck in their driveway for a moment. Through the window I could see the kitchen light. I could see Trevor moving around, and then I saw Melissa, and she was already doing something on her phone. Not watching to see if I was okay. Not coming after me. I backed out of the driveway and drove until I found a Walmart about 6 miles away. I parked in the far corner of the lot away from the light, and I sat there until midnight trying to figure out what came next. I was 60 years old. I had a quarter tank of gas and $43 in my wallet. My credit cards were frozen from the bankruptcy proceedings. I had a degree in mechanical engineering, 38 years of business experience, and nowhere to sleep. The first night in the truck was the worst night of my life, and I had watched my wife die. I ran the engine for heat until I was worried about gas, then turned it off and layered every piece of clothing I had in the duffel bag. I thought about Sandra. I thought about what she would say if she could see me. I thought about all the mornings I had driven to the plant before sunrise, believing that sacrifice had a point, that hard work compounded like interest, that the life you built through discipline and integrity was a life that couldn't be taken from you. I had been wrong about that too. By the third day, I had developed a routine. McDonald's in the morning for coffee and warmth. The public library in the afternoons to use the computer and look for options. Walmart parking lot at night. I had enough cash left for another day, maybe two. I was trying to contact an attorney about the bankruptcy proceedings when a woman at the library asked if I was okay, and the kindness in her voice nearly undid me. I told her I was fine. I wasn't fine. That night, the fourth night, something happened that changed everything. It was just past 5 in the morning. I had managed a few hours of sleep. I woke up to a knocking on the passenger window of my truck. I startled hard, and my heart was racing as I looked over. A man in a dark suit was standing outside. Not security, not police. He was older, maybe 70, with the kind of bearing that comes from decades of being the most competent person in any room. He held up one hand, palm out, showing he meant no harm. I rolled the window down 2 inches. "Excuse me," he said. "Are you Bernard Caldwell?" I hadn't heard my full name used in years. My whole life, everyone just called me Bernie. "Who's asking?" I said. "My name is Hargrove," he said. "I work for a Mr. Leonard Fitch. He's been trying to locate you for the past 10 days. He says it's urgent, and I'm afraid time is very short." Leonard Fitch. The name hit me somewhere in the back of my memory and then moved away before I could grab it. "I don't know anyone by that name," I said. The man nodded, unsurprised. "He said you might say that. He said to mention the Kellerman Bridge project, 1988. And just like that, it came back. I was 24 years old, still 2 years away from starting Caldwell Precision, working as a site engineer on a bridge construction project outside Columbus for a company called Fitch Industrial. My supervisor had been a man named Walt. No, a man named Leonard. Leonard Fitch, the founder's son, who had been doing a site inspection and had walked onto a scaffolding platform I had just flagged as structurally compromised. I had grabbed him by the collar and hauled him back, and 3 seconds later, the platform had dropped 40 feet to the ground. I had never thought of it as a heroic thing. I had thought of it as the kind of thing any engineer would do. I had done it on instinct, and then gone back to my work, and I had left Fitch Industrial 2 years later to start my own company and never spoken to Leonard Fitch again. "He's been looking for me for 10 days, I asked. "He's ill," Hargrove said quietly. "The doctors say he has perhaps a week. He's been asking for you by name. He said there are things that need to be finalized, and you're the only person he trusts to witness them." I looked at this man standing in a Walmart parking lot at 5 in the morning in a suit that cost more than my first car, and I thought, this is either a miracle or a scam. And either way, I'm sleeping in a pickup truck, so I don't have much to lose. "Where is he?" I asked. "Mount Carmel East," the man said. "The private care wing." I followed the car. The private wing of that hospital was a different country from any hospital was a different country from any hospital I had ever visited. The hallways were quiet and warm, the lighting was soft. A woman at the desk was expecting me and took me directly to a room at the end of a corridor, and before she even knocked, I could hear a voice inside, weak but unmistakably that of a man who had once been used to commanding rooms. "Come in." He was small in the bed, that was the first thing I noticed. The Leonard Fitch in my memory had been large, vigorous, the kind of man who stood with his legs apart and shook your hand too hard. The man in the bed was 83 years old and weighed maybe 140 pounds, but his eyes were exactly the same, clear, sharp, watching me the way a man watches something he's been waiting a long time to see. "Bernard," he said, and his face relaxed in a way that told me whatever he had been carrying it a long time. I sat in the chair beside him, and he reached out and gripped my forearm with both hands for a moment, then released me. "I've been following your career," he said. "Caldwell Precision. 38 years, 62 employees at your peak. You built something real." "I lost it," I said. "I know," he said. "I know exactly what happened, and I need you to understand something before we talk about anything else. What happened to your company was not an accident." I went very still. Leonard's voice was quiet and deliberate. "Your company was destroyed systematically. The contract termination, the loan recall, the insurance irregularities, those things don't happen simultaneously by coincidence. They were coordinated." "By who?" I asked. He reached for a folder on the bedside table and opened it with hands that shook slightly. Inside was a stack of documents, and on the top page, I could see my son-in-law Trevor's name. "Trevor Albright," Leonard said, "has been working with a real estate investment group called Copeland Acquisition Partners for approximately 22 months. Your manufacturing plant sits on 4.2 acres in a corridor that Copeland has been buying up for a mixed-use development project. The plant was the last piece they needed, and it was the one piece they couldn't get because you refused to sell. I had refused to sell. Twice. 2 years ago and again 8 months ago. Both times I had told the buyers, different names, different companies, that Caldwell Precision wasn't for sale at any price. That 62 people worked there, and I wasn't going to hand them over to a developer who would tear down the building and put up condominiums." "Trevor," I said. It didn't come out as a question. "He introduced Copeland to your largest client. He provided them with internal financial information about your company's debt structure, which allowed them to time the loan recall perfectly. The insured's irregularities were manufactured through a contact Trevor has at the carrier." Leonard turned to the next page. "He received a finder's fee agreement for $280,000 contingent on successful acquisition of the property." I sat with that number for a moment. $280,000. The price of my life's work and 62 people's jobs. "Melissa," I said. "Does your daughter sign documents?" Leonard said carefully. "Whether she understood what she was signing is something I cannot tell you. Her signature appears on a limited liability agreement that suggests at minimum she knew the structure of the arrangement, even if not every detail." That was the moment I understood what betrayal actually felt like. Not the moment on the porch when Trevor said they couldn't have instability in the house. That had hurt. This was something different. This was the floor dropping out. This was the scaffold platform falling 40 feet. My daughter. Leonard gave me a moment. He was that kind of man. He knew when to wait. "There's more," he said finally. I nodded. "Trevor has been accessing your company's financial systems for approximately 3 years. Melissa gave him your IT vendor's contact information, telling him it was to help modernize your invoicing process. He used that access to divert small payments, vendor refunds, client overpayments, expense reimbursements, into a holding account. The total over 3 years is approximately $94,000. $94,000, gone in amounts small enough that I had never noticed because I trusted the people around me enough to stop checking." "And there's a final element," Leonard said. He hesitated, and I could see that this one was the one he had been reluctant to tell me. He handed me a single page, a document with my name on it that I had never seen, and below my name, a signature I had never made. It was a durable power of attorney, granting Trevor and Melissa Albright full legal and financial authority over my affairs. "This was prepared 4 months ago," Leonard said. "The plan, as my investigators understand it, was to allow the bankruptcy to progress far enough that you would have no viable options remaining. Then they would approach you, offer to take you in, help you navigate the process. Once you were living in their house, under their care, they would present the power of attorney and explain that signing it was necessary to manage your remaining assets through the bankruptcy. At that point, you would have nothing to negotiate with and nowhere else to go. They would own me, I said. Legally, yes. I thought about Melissa's voice on the phone that morning. Come over, Dad. We'll figure something out. I thought about Trevor opening the door and not saying Dad. I thought about Melissa staring at her coffee mug. They had let me in that night not to help me. They had been deciding whether the moment was right to execute the plan. Why are you telling me this? I asked Leonard. Because I owe you my life, he said simply, and because you're the only person I have ever encountered in 60 years of business who saved someone's life and then went right back to work without asking for anything in return. I've been watching over you for 35 years, Bernard, quietly, the way I knew you would want it. Contract introductions, references, credit support through intermediaries. I wanted you to succeed on your own, and you did. But when this started, when I saw what they were doing, I tried to intervene and I couldn't move fast enough. And now I'm dying, and I need to know that the wrong will be made right. I looked at this man I had barely known, who had been living in the edges of my life for 35 years, holding a quiet vigil I never knew existed. What are you asking me to do? I said. He handed me the final document. I'm asking you to witness my will. And then I'm going to tell you what I've arranged, and you're going to have to decide what kind of man you want to be when this is over. Leonard Fitch passed away on a Thursday morning, 9 days after Hargrove knocked on my truck window. I was there. I held his hand through the last hour, and his last words to me were, "You showed me once that courage isn't a calculation. Don't forget that." The will was airtight. Leonard had no surviving spouse, and his 2 children, a son in Seattle and a daughter in London, had been notified through their attorneys. They arrived for the reading dressed like they were attending a board meeting, which I suppose in their minds they were. I sat in the corner of the conference room at Morrison, Tate & Wills and watched them talk to each other in low voices, never once looking at the photograph of their father on the table. The attorney, a composed woman named Sandra Tate, read through the standard provisions and then reached the substantive bequests. Leonard's son received $1. His daughter received $1. The remaining estate, $41 million in assets, plus equity stakes in 4 active businesses and controlling interest in Fitch Industrial, which had never stopped operating, was bequeathed in its entirety to me. The room detonated. I sat through the screaming and the accusations and the threats, and I felt almost nothing. I was thinking about 62 people who had lost their jobs. I was thinking about Trevor's signature on a finder's fee agreement. I was thinking about my daughter staring at a coffee mug. Sandra Tate had the room cleared. As she walked me out, she said quietly, "Leonard prepared extensively for the challenges. The legal footing is solid. But you should know what he arranged, beyond the bequest." She handed me a briefing document. Leonard's team had spent the last months of his life quietly acquiring assets connected to mine. The commercial real estate on which my former plant sat had been purchased out of bankruptcy proceedings by a shell company, which was now mine. The plant itself could be rebuilt. The 62 jobs could come back, and Leonard had purchased the mortgage on my daughter's house in Dublin, Ohio. It had transferred 3 months ago to a holding company that was now mine. Every payment Melissa and Trevor had made since then had been going, without their knowledge, into an account in my name. I sat in my rental car outside Sandra Tate's office and let myself feel all of it, the grief, the betrayal, the strange vertigo of going from $43 to $41 million in the span of 9 days. I allowed myself to feel it fully and completely, and then I put it away because there were decisions to make and I wanted to make them clearly. I drove to Dublin. I parked across the street from my daughter's house. The house I had helped them buy with $60,000 in 2019. The house where my grandchildren lived. 2 of them. A girl, 7, and a boy, 5. Their names were Lily and Cooper, and Lily had Sandra's eyes, and I needed to not forget that when I walked through that door. I called the attorney. "I want to meet with them," I said. "Can you arrange it? Tell them the mortgage servicer needs to discuss something about their account. Don't use my name." She paused. "Leonard said you might ask for exactly this." "What did he say when he thought about it?" "He said, I hope Bernie chooses to give them what I never gave my own children." A way back. 2 evenings later, I sat across from my daughter and my son-in-law in their living room in a suit I had bought with part of my advance from the estate. I had cut my hair. I had slept in a real bed. I was not the man they had turned away in the rain. A paralegal from Sanders' office sat beside me and introduced me to them simply as Mr. Caldwell, representing the new holding company that had acquired their mortgage. Trevor, who processed transactions like this regularly in his own work, leaned forward in his familiar salesman's posture. Melissa was nervous in a way she was trying to hide. I let the paralegal walk through 2 minutes of documentation. Then I said, "Trevor." He looked at me, and I watched the moment arrive. The slowness of it, the way recognition moved through his face like weather. "Bernie." His voice was barely audible. Melissa's hands went to her mouth. "Hello, sweetheart," I said to my daughter. "We should talk." I laid it out calmly. The finder's fee agreement, the coordinated loan recall, the insurance irregularities, the $94,000, the forged power of attorney. I placed each document on the coffee table between us the way you lay down cards, and I watched Trevor's face go from pale to gray, and I watched my daughter begin to cry. "I didn't know about all of it," Melissa said, and her voice broke. "I didn't know about the $94,000. I didn't know about the power of attorney. Trevor told me the sale was going to happen anyway, that someone was going to buy that property, and that at least this way we would have something to show for it." "You knew," I said, not cruelly, just clearly. She put her face in her hands. Trevor had stopped trying to speak. He was looking at the documents with the expression of a man doing rapid calculations and finding every column coming up short. "The house you're sitting in," I said, "belongs to me. The car in your garage, the Lexus. I hold the financing. The $87,000 in credit card debt you're carrying, I hold a significant portion of that as well. Legally, I have the ability to end your financial life as it currently exists within 30 days. The silence in the room was the kind that has weight. "But I'm not going to do that," I said. Trevor looked up sharply, and I could see in that look the thing I needed to see. Not relief, not calculation, but the beginning of shame. Real shame. The kind that doesn't have anywhere to go. "I'm going to give you a choice," I said, "because that's what fathers do, even when they don't deserve it." I placed the final document on the table. Option 1. I exercise every legal right I have. The house goes into foreclosure proceedings immediately. The fraud evidence, and it is fraud, Trevor, a federal charge, goes to the U.S. Attorney's Office. You both face criminal prosecution and civil liability that will follow you for the rest of your lives. Neither of them moved. Option 2. You accept the terms of this agreement. I walked them through it. They would sell the house in a controlled sale and use the equity to begin repayment. They would live within a strict budget monitored by a financial trustee of my choosing. 50% of all income above basic living expenses would go toward restitution. The $94,000, the $60,000 I had given them for the down payment I now considered stolen, and a portion of the wages of 62 people who had lost their jobs because of what Trevor had arranged. That last figure was the one I had spent the most time on. I couldn't give those people their jobs back overnight, but I could make it part of what Trevor owed the world. The agreement runs for 15 years, I said. Trevor inhaled sharply. Every month, I continued, you each write me a letter, not an email, a letter. In it, you explain what you've learned, what you understand now that you didn't understand when you turned me away in the rain. I looked at my daughter directly then, and I held her gaze. And every Sunday morning, you bring Lily and Cooper to have breakfast with me. Not because I'm using my grandchildren as leverage, but because they are the reason I am sitting in this room instead of in a prosecutor's office, and they deserve to know their grandfather. Melissa was crying without sound, her shoulders moving. If you complete the 15 years, if you show me, actually show me, in those letters and in those Sunday mornings that you understand what you did and that you become different people, then at the end of it, the debt is cleared, the records are sealed, and we start whatever comes next from zero. I stood up and straightened my jacket. You have until noon tomorrow, I said. Call Sandra Tate's office with your decision. If I don't hear from you, the other process begins automatically. I was almost to the door when Melissa said, Dad. I stopped, but didn't turn around right away. I'm sorry, she said. I know that's not enough. I know it can't fix what we did, but I need you to know that I know that. I turned around. She was standing now, and she looked like a child, which she was, my child. And that fact had not changed and would not change regardless of what she had done. "I know you know," I said. "That's why you're getting the option I gave you." They signed the next morning, 30 minutes before the deadline. That was 8 months ago. I have rebuilt Caldwell Precision, not in Akron, but in a facility in Canton. 31 employees so far, with a goal of 50 by end of year. 8 of them are people who worked for me before. They knew the company and I knew them, and starting over together has been something I don't have words for yet. I live in a house outside Columbus, nothing extravagant, with a deck that faces east and catches the morning light in a way that makes the first coffee of the day feel like an occasion. The letters from Melissa and Trevor come every month without exception. Trevor's early letters were careful and legal, written by a man protecting himself even in apology. They have changed. The letter last month ran 6 pages and included a section where he tried to explain, really explain, how he had convinced himself that what he was doing was justified. Reading it was not comfortable. It wasn't supposed to be. Melissa's letters are different. She writes the way she used to talk to me when she was a teenager, honest and rambling and occasionally funny in the dark way that grief sometimes is. She wrote last month, "I keep thinking about the way you just got up and left that night without saying anything, and I think that was the most frightening thing I've ever seen. Not because you were angry, because you weren't." She's right that I wasn't angry. Not anymore. The anger had burned through on its own, the way fevers do. Lily and Cooper come on Sunday mornings. Lily has her grandmother's eyes and her father's relentless questions about how things work. Cooper currently believes I know everything about trucks, which I have done nothing to discourage. I don't know what the next chapter of my relationship with my daughter looks like. I'm not sure you can know that in advance. What I know is that she's trying, and trying is different from what she was doing before, and that difference is not nothing. Leonard Fitch saved my life the same way I saved his, without calculation, as an act of faith that the person in front of you is worth saving. I have thought about that a great deal in the last 8 months. I have thought about what it costs to give someone the chance to come back from the worst thing they've ever done, and whether that cost is worth it. I think it is. I think the price of holding on to Lily's hand on Sunday mornings while she tells me about her week is a price I would pay 100 times over. I built Caldwell Precision from a rented garage and a used machine. I built it on the belief that what you make with your hands and your integrity is worth something that money alone can't measure. I still believe that. Maybe now more than I ever did. I've thought a lot about the night I drove away from my daughter's house in the rain. Not with anger anymore, that's long gone, but with the kind of clarity that only comes after you've sat with something long enough to actually understand it. What happened to me wasn't just about money. It wasn't even really about betrayal, though that's the word that fits on the surface. What it was about, when I strip everything else away, is this: the choices we make in the dark, when we think no one is watching and no one will ever know, are the choices that build the life we actually end up living. Trevor made his choices across 22 months of phone calls and signed agreements and quiet arrangements. Melissa made hers the night she looked at a coffee mug instead of at her father's face. And I had made mine 38 years earlier on a construction site outside Columbus, when I grabbed a man by the collar without stopping to calculate what it was worth to me. None of us knew in those moments what we were really building. That's the part that stays with me. There is no action that doesn't compound. The small dishonesties don't stay small. The small acts of courage don't stay small either. Trevor's 22 months of calculated betrayal grew into something that cost him his house, his freedom, and a decade and a half of his future. My 2 seconds of instinct in 1988 grew into a man who spent 35 years quietly making sure I had what I needed to succeed. Everything compounds. Everything. I'm not a man who believes the universe is keeping score in any organized way. I don't think there's a ledger somewhere being carefully maintained. What I believe is simpler and maybe harder. The kind of person you are in the moments that don't seem to matter is the kind of person you become, and the kind of person you become determines almost everything that follows. Leonard Fitch taught me that, though not in words, he taught it by the way he lived, by the fact that he remembered a debt most men would have rationalized away and spent decades honoring it without ever being asked to. That's a form of integrity I hadn't had a name for before I met him again in that hospital room. I have a name for it now. It's just consistency. It's being the same man on the bad days that you are on the good ones. The thing about Melissa that I hold on to, the thing that makes the Sunday mornings possible, that makes Cooper's questions about trucks feel like medicine is that she is trying to be consistent now in a different direction. The letters she writes me are honest in a way that costs her something. I can tell. And that cost, that willingness to keep showing up and keep being honest even when it's uncomfortable, is exactly the work that integrity requires. She didn't have it before. She's building it now. That matters to me more than I expected it to. I rebuilt my company, 31 people so far. I'm not starting over. I'm starting differently, which is not the same thing. I know now what I perhaps knew intellectually before but didn't feel in my bones, that what you build is only as solid as the character you build it on. The machinery doesn't matter. The contracts don't matter. The character is the whole thing. I lost everything and got more back than I deserved, and what I keep is this. The measure of a life is not what you accumulate. It's who you are in the dark, on the bad nights, in the Walmart parking lot at 5 in the morning when nobody is watching. That's the real account, and it never stops compounding.